On a crystal-clear morning in the Pacific, two of America's most advanced fighter jets screamed through the air at Mach 1.8, their pilots' hearts racing not from the speed, but from what they had just heard crackling through their radio headsets. The voice on the other end wasn't supposed to exist. It belonged to someone who had been declared dead 3 years ago in a classified operation that never officially happened. Captain Sarah Mitchell had been the Navy's most decorated female pilot before she vanished during a Black Ops mission over enemy territory. Her F-18 Super Hornet had been shot down, her body never recovered. Her family told she died serving her country. The military had moved on, awarded her posthumous medals, and buried an empty casket with full honors. But now, as two F-22 Raptors closed in on an unidentified aircraft approaching the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, that same voice was cutting through the static, calling out clearance codes that only she would know. The impossible had become reality, and it was about to turn everything the military thought they knew upside down. What happened next would challenge the boundaries between life and death, loyalty and betrayal, and force two nations to confront a truth so dangerous that some would kill to keep it buried forever. The morning sun painted the Pacific Ocean in brilliant shades of gold, as Lieutenant Colonel Jack Viper Morrison adjusted his oxygen mask and checked his instruments for the third time in 5 minutes. Flying an F-22 Raptor never got old, but today something felt different. The routine combat air patrol around the USS Gerald R. Ford had turned into anything but routine when radar picked up an unidentified aircraft approaching from the northwest at high speed. Razor 2-1, this is Viper 2-1. Bogey bearing 270, range 40 miles and closing. Morrison radioed to his wingman, Captain Lisa Razor Chen. Her F-22 maintained perfect formation, 300 feet off his starboard wing, the morning light reflecting off her aircraft's angular stealth coating. Copy that, Viper. IFF is dark, no transponder signal. Control tower's going crazy down there, Chen responded, her voice steady, despite the unusual nature of their intercept mission. In her 5 years flying the Raptor, she had never encountered an aircraft that could approach a carrier strike group undetected until it was already within 40 miles. The USS Gerald R. Ford's air traffic control had been tracking what appeared to be a ghost. The aircraft showed up intermittently on radar, appearing and disappearing like something out of a science fiction movie. Whatever it was, it possessed stealth capabilities that rivaled their own F-22s, and that should have been impossible. No foreign nation had demonstrated that level of technology, at least not according to the intelligence briefings they received weekly. Morrison pushed his throttles forward, feeling the twin Pratt & Whitney engines respond with a surge of power that pressed him back into his ejection seat. The F-22 accelerated smoothly through the sound barrier, the supersonic boom rolling across the empty ocean below. His radar was painting the target more clearly now, showing an aircraft roughly the size of a fighter jet, but with a configuration he didn't recognize. Viper 2-1, this is home plate. The carrier's air traffic controller crackled through his headset. Be advised, bogey is now at 25 miles, and maintaining course directly for the ship. You are cleared to intercept and identify. Rules of engagement are weapons tight unless threatened. Roger, home plate. Weapons tight, intercept, and identify, Morrison acknowledged, though his finger unconsciously traced the weapon selector switch on his sidestick controller. The F-22 carried 6 AIM 120 AMRAM MAW.22. 9x Sidewinders, more than enough firepower to eliminate any threat, but something about this situation felt wrong. As they closed to within 10 miles of the target, Morrison's radar warning receiver remained silent. Whatever this aircraft was, it wasn't painting them with targeting radar, suggesting either peaceful intentions or confidence that it didn't need to lock onto them to be a threat. Both possibilities made him nervous. Visual contact, Chen announced suddenly. Holy shit, Viper, are you seeing this? Morrison looked up from his instruments and felt his blood run cold. The aircraft ahead of them looked like nothing he had ever seen before. It had the general configuration of a fighter jet, but its lines were all wrong, as if someone had taken a conventional design and stretched it through dimensions that didn't quite exist. The aircraft seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, its surface appearing to shift between different shades of grey and silver. Home plate. Viper 2-1 has visual contact with the bogey. This is unlike any aircraft in our recognition manuals. Repeat, this is not a known aircraft type. Morrison keyed his radio while maintaining formation with the mysterious craft, which showed no sign of acknowledging their presence. The radio crackled with interference before the controller's voice came through clearly. Viper 2-1, approach to standard intercept position and attempt radio contact on guard frequency. Be prepared for evasive action if the bogey shows hostile intent. Morrison and Chen moved into the classic intercept formation, with Morrison taking position off the unknown aircraft's left wing, while Chen moved to the right. At this distance, Morrison could see details that made his skin crawl. The aircraft's canopy was tinted so dark it appeared black, making it impossible to see inside. Along the fuselage, markings that looked almost familiar caught his eye, but they seemed to shift and blur when he tried to focus on them directly. Unknown aircraft, this is United States Air Force F-22, on guard frequency. You are approaching a UN Navy carrier strike group in international waters. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Over. Morrison transmitted on the emergency frequency that all aircraft were required to monitor. Silence stretched for long seconds, broken only by the white noise of the radio and the muffled roar of jet engines. Morrison was about to repeat his call when the radio crackled to life with a transmission that made his heart skip a beat. Viper 2-1, this is Ghost Rider requesting permission to land. The voice was female, clear despite the static, and spoke with the crisp diction of a trained military pilot. But it was what she said next that sent ice through Morrison's veins. Authentication code Delta 7, 7 Whiskey November, requesting emergency priority landing on the Ford. Morrison's hand froze over his radio transmit button. Delta 7, 7 Whiskey November was a classified authentication code, but not just any code. It was Captain Sarah Mitchell's personal call sign authentication, a code that had been retired and classified after her death 3 years ago. Morrison knew because he had been her wingman on her final mission, the one from which she never returned. Did she just say Delta 7, 7 Whiskey November? Chen's voice came through the intercom, tight with disbelief. That's impossible, Morrison whispered. But even as he said it, he knew what he had heard. The voice on the radio belonged to Sarah Mitchell, the woman whose funeral he had attended, whose medal ceremony he had watched her parents accept her posthumous decorations. Ghost Rider, say again your authentication, Morrison transmitted, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Viper 2-1. Authentication. Delta 7-7 Whiskey November. I know this is confusing, Jack, but I need to land on the Ford immediately. There are people who want me dead, and they're not far behind. The use of his first name confirmed what Morrison's rational mind refused to accept. Only Sarah Mitchell had called him Jack in mission communications, a breach of protocol that had become their private joke during their tour together in the Pacific. But Sarah Mitchell was dead. He had seen the intelligence footage of her FA-18 exploding over enemy territory. He had carried her empty casket at Arlington National Cemetery. Home plate, Viper 2-1. Morrison radioed the carrier, his voice carefully controlled. We have a situation here. The bogey is claiming to be a deceased U.S. Navy pilot and is requesting emergency landing. She's provided authentication codes that check out but shouldn't exist. The radio silence stretched for nearly a minute before the air traffic controller responded. Viper 2-1, maintain intercept position. We're patching you through to the Admiral. Admiral Rebecca Torres had been expecting a routine morning when her aide burst into her ready room aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford with news that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the mission that had cost the Navy one of its finest pilots. As commander of Carrier Strike Group 12, Torres had overseen hundreds of combat missions, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Admiral, this is Viper 2-1 on secure channel. Morrison's voice crackled through the encrypted radio. I need to confirm something with you directly. 3 years ago, Captain Sarah Mitchell was shot down during Operation Silent Thunder. I was her wingman. The aircraft we're escorting is claiming to be Captain Mitchell and is providing authentication codes that match her classified call sign. Torres felt the coffee cup slip from her fingers, the ceramic shattering on the deck plating as brown liquid spread across the polished floor. Operation Silent Thunder had been so classified that fewer than a dozen people knew the full details. It had been a black ops mission to extract intelligence from a facility that officially didn't exist, in a country the United States wasn't officially operating in. Viper, what is your assessment of the pilot's voice recognition? Torres asked, knowing that Morrison had flown more missions with Mitchell than any other pilot in the squadron. Admiral, unless someone has developed technology to perfectly replicate a person's voice patterns and speech mannerisms, this is Captain Sarah Mitchell. She knows details about our previous missions that weren't in any official reports. She's asking about people we served with, using nicknames that only squadron members would know. Torres closed her eyes and made a decision that would either save lives or compromise national security. Viper 2-1, escort the bogey to carrier-controlled airspace and prepare for landing operations. Alert the medical team and security personnel. And Viper, Not a word of this goes beyond need to know until we figure out what the hell is going on. As the three aircraft approached the massive bulk of the USS Gerald R. Ford, Morrison could see the flight deck crew scrambling to prepare for an unscheduled landing. Emergency vehicles positioned themselves around the landing area, and he could make out security personnel taking positions throughout the ship's island structure. The mysterious aircraft ahead of him flew with the precision of an experienced carrier pilot, maintaining perfect altitude and airspeed as it entered the carrier's landing pattern. Morrison watched in amazement as the craft's configuration began to change, wings extending and landing gear deploying, with movements that seemed almost organic rather than mechanical. Viper 2-1. Ghost Rider is configured for landing. Jack, I know you have questions, and I'll answer them all once I'm on deck. But right now, you need to know that my extraction from that facility 3 years ago was successful. What I've found there changes everything we thought we knew about our enemy's capabilities. There are people in our own government who wanted me to stay dead because of what I learned. The landing was perfect. The mysterious aircraft catching the number 3 wire with textbook precision. As it rolled to a stop, Morrison could see the arresting gear crew and security personnel surrounding it, their weapons drawn but not aimed. The aircraft's engines wound down with a sound unlike any jet engine Morrison had ever heard, more like the whisper of wind through canyon walls than the roar of burning jet fuel. The canopy opened with a soft hiss of pressurization equalizing, and a figure in a flight suit began to climb out. Even from his position in the landing pattern, Morrison could see the distinctive way she moved, the careful precision of a pilot who had survived situations that would have killed most people. As Morrison brought his own F-22 around for landing, he caught a glimpse of the pilot on the flight deck. Even wearing a helmet and oxygen mask, there was no mistaking the posture and bearing of Captain Sarah Mitchell. But what sent chills down his spine was what he could see of the aircraft she had arrived in. Up close, it was clearly not of any known design or manufacture. The metal seemed to flow like liquid mercury, and symbols along its fuselage appeared to be written in no language he recognized. Home plate, Viper 2-1 requesting immediate landing, Morrison radioed, his need to get on deck and find answers overwhelming his normal procedural discipline. Cleared for immediate landing, Viper 2-1. Welcome home. As Morrison's F-22 touched down on the carrier deck, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Sarah Mitchell had brought back with her would change not just their understanding of the missing years, but the very nature of the conflict they had thought they were fighting. The woman who had supposedly died 3 years ago was very much alive, and she had returned with technology that shouldn't exist, and knowledge that someone had been willing to kill to suppress the impossible had become reality, and Morrison realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The secured briefing room aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford had seen its share of classified discussions, but nothing approaching the level of impossibility that Admiral Torres faced as she looked across the metal table at a woman who should have been dead for 3 years. Captain Sarah Mitchell sat calmly in the chair opposite her, looking exactly as she had the day she disappeared, showing no signs of having aged during her absence. The medical examination had confirmed what Torres's eyes already told her. Fingerprints, dental records, DNA samples, retinal scans, even obscure surgical scars from Mitchell's Academy training days all matched perfectly. Every test confirmed that this was indeed Captain Sarah Mitchell, yet she claimed to have spent the last 3 years in a place that officially didn't exist, working with people who shouldn't have the technology she had brought back with her. The facility you sent me to extract intelligence from wasn't what we thought it was, Mitchell began, her voice carrying the same confident tone Torres remembered from mission briefings years ago. Operation Silent Thunder was supposed to be a simple grab and go. Get in, download their computer systems, and get out before anyone knew we were there. But when I penetrated their air defenses and reached the target coordinates, there was no enemy installation. Mitchell paused, looking out through the porthole at the endless expanse of Pacific Ocean. Instead, there was a research facility that had been hidden from satellite reconnaissance by technology we didn't know existed. The attack on my aircraft wasn't from enemy fighters. It was from automated defense systems protecting something much more valuable than military intelligence. Torres leaned forward, her coffee growing cold as she listened to Mitchell's account. The intelligence report said you were shot down over a known enemy missile site. Your aircraft's emergency beacon transmitted until the explosion, then went dead. We had satellite confirmation of the wreckage. The wreckage was real, Mitchell confirmed. But it wasn't my aircraft. The defense systems that engaged me used some kind of directed energy weapon that disabled my FA-18's engines and electronics. I was forced to eject over the facility, and when my aircraft crashed, they made it look like I had been killed, to buy themselves time to study what they had captured. Mitchell reached into her flight suit and withdrew a small device that looked like nothing Torres had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a smartphone, but appeared to be made of a material that shifted between metallic and crystalline depending on the angle of view. Symbols flowed across its surface like living text, rearranging themselves as she watched. "This is what they were really protecting," Mitchell said, placing the device on the table. "It's not human technology." The facility was a joint research operation between several nations, including some that are supposedly our allies. They were reverse engineering technology recovered from what they called non-terrestrial sources. Torres felt the world tilt slightly as the implications of Mitchell's words sank in. "Are you telling me that you've spent 3 years working with extraterrestrial technology?"
Not extraterrestrial, Mitchell corrected. That's what we assumed at first, too.
But the truth is more complicated and more dangerous. This technology comes from us, but from a timeline that diverged from ours decades ago. The facility was studying artifacts and information from a parallel version of Earth where technological development followed a completely different path. The device on the table pulsed with a soft blue light, and Torres found herself leaning away from it instinctively. How is that possible? Parallel timelines are science fiction. Mitchell's expression grew grave. 3 years ago, I would have agreed with you. But the evidence is overwhelming. The facility had access to intelligence from dozens of different timeline variants, including detailed information about military capabilities, political developments, and technological advances that don't exist in our reality. They knew about classified operations months before they happened, could predict enemy movements with impossible accuracy, and had access to weapons technology that shouldn't exist. Torres thought about the implications of what Mitchell was describing. If hostile forces had access to intelligence from parallel timelines, it would explain the string of intelligence failures and compromised operations that had plagued the Navy over the past several years. Missions that should have been routine had turned into disasters, and enemies had demonstrated capabilities that intelligence agencies insisted they didn't possess. "The aircraft you arrived in," Torres said slowly. "That's from this other timeline?" Mitchell nodded. "It's called a phase shifter. In their reality, conventional aircraft were abandoned decades ago in favor of craft that could manipulate local spacetime to achieve effective invisibility and faster-than-light travel. The technology is based on principles our physicists are only beginning to understand." Torres stood and walked to the porthole, watching the endless ocean while her mind tried to process information that challenged everything she thought she knew about reality. "Sarah, if what you're telling me is true, why are you here now? Why reveal yourself after 3 years?" Mitchell's voice took on an urgency that Torres had never heard before. "Because they're planning something called the Convergence event. The facility wasn't just studying parallel timeline technology, they were preparing to use it. In 6 days, they intend to open a permanent gateway between our timeline and theirs, allowing their more advanced military forces to cross over and establish control over both realities." The implications hit Torres like a physical blow. An invasion force with technology decades ahead of anything in their arsenal would be unstoppable. Who's behind this? Which countries are involved? "That's the problem," Mitchell replied grimly. "It's not just foreign nations. The facility was funded and operated by a coalition that includes elements from our own government. People in the Pentagon, the CIA, even some members of Congress have been working with them, believing they could control the technology and use it to ensure American dominance."
They don't understand that they're being manipulated by forces that view our entire timeline as expendable.
Torres felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's air conditioning. "Do you have proof of this?" Mitchell touched the device on the table, and its surface came alive with holographic displays that materialized in the air above it. The images showed detailed schematics of weapons that looked like nothing in any military arsenal, star charts marking locations that didn't match any known stellar configurations, and most disturbing of all, surveillance footage from inside Pentagon briefing rooms and CIA safehouses. "This device contains terabytes of intelligence gathered over 3 years," Mitchell explained. "Communications intercepts, financial records, technical specifications for their weapons and spacecraft, and complete dossiers on every person involved in the conspiracy. But, more importantly, it contains the location and operational details of the convergence device they plan to activate." Torres studied the holographic displays, recognizing some of the faces in the surveillance footage as high-ranking officials she had briefed personally. "Sarah, if even half of what you're showing me is accurate, this information could destabilize governments worldwide. Why bring it to me instead of going through normal intelligence channels?" Mitchell's laugh was bitter. because normal intelligence channels are compromised. The people I would normally report to are either part of the conspiracy or have been eliminated by it. You're one of the few senior officers who wasn't recruited because your psychological profile indicated you couldn't be corrupted or manipulated. That's why I had to return this way, using technology they couldn't track or intercept. The device projected a new image, showing a massive installation built into the side of a mountain in a location Torres didn't recognize. The complex was enormous, easily the size of a major airport, with structures that seemed to defy conventional architecture. Energy readings from the site showed power consumption levels that would require multiple nuclear reactors to sustain. The convergence device is located here, Mitchell said, highlighting a section of the installation. It's hidden in the Rocky Mountains, disguised as a deep space research facility. In 6 days, they plan to open a gateway large enough for their invasion forces to begin crossing over. Once that happens, resistance will become impossible. Torres studied the intelligence data streaming past her eyes, cross-referencing what she saw with her knowledge of current military operations and classified projects. To her growing horror, she realized that several recent joint training exercises and equipment relocations were beginning to make sense in this new context. Forces had been positioned and resources allocated in ways that would facilitate rather than resist an invasion. "What do you need from me?" Torres asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "I need you to help me destroy the convergence device before it can be activated," Mitchell replied, "but we can't use conventional forces. Too many people in the chain of command are compromised. We need to go in with a small team using the phase shifter technology, hit the installation fast and hard, and get out before they can organize a response." Torres looked at the holographic displays showing weapon configurations and tactical plans that seemed more like science fiction than military operations. "Sarah, what you're proposing is essentially a one-way mission. Even if we succeed in destroying this device, we'd be fighting against elements of our own government. We'd be branded as traitors." Mitchell's expression hardened. "Admiral, in 5 days, the concept of treason will become meaningless. If they succeed in opening that gateway, our timeline becomes a colony of theirs, and everyone we've sworn to protect becomes a subject of forces that view human beings as laboratory specimens. The people behind this conspiracy believe they'll be given positions of authority in the new order, but they're wrong. They're useful idiots who will be eliminated once their services are no longer needed." Torres thought about her daughter serving as a Marine lieutenant in Afghanistan, about the millions of Americans who trusted their military to protect them from threats they couldn't even imagine. The weight of the decision she was about to make felt like a physical force pressing down on her shoulders. "How many people would we need for this mission?" she asked finally. Mitchell consulted the device, which displayed tactical projections and personnel requirements. The facility is heavily defended, but most of their security is designed to repel conventional attacks. A team of 12 highly trained operators using phase shifter technology could penetrate their defenses and reach the convergence device. But Admiral, once we commit to this course of action, there's no going back. We'll be at war with forces that most people don't even know exist. Torres walked back to the table and looked down at the device that had brought knowledge from another reality into their own. Everything Mitchell had told her was impossible, but the evidence was overwhelming. The choice before her was simple in its terrifying clarity. Accept the impossible and fight for the future of human civilization, or dismiss it as fantasy and watch helplessly as everything she had sworn to protect disappeared forever. "I'll need to brief my senior staff," Torres said finally. "People I trust absolutely. We'll need to move quickly and quietly, using only personnel whose loyalty is beyond question." Mitchell nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Admiral, there's one more thing you need to know. The reason I was able to return now, with this technology and this intelligence, is because the other timeline's version of you helped me escape. She gave her life to ensure this information reached our reality in time to stop the convergence event. In a timeline, they failed to prevent the invasion, and their world became a battlefield between multiple realities. She made me promise that we would succeed where they failed." Torres felt the full weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders as she realized that somewhere in another reality, another version of herself had died to give them this chance. The impossible had become not just possible but necessary, and in less than 6 days, she would either save 2 worlds or watch them both fall to forces that treated human civilization as a disposable resource. The war for the future had begun, and the first battle would be fought by a team of people using technology that officially didn't exist against an enemy that most of the world would never know about. Success would mean saving both timelines, That failure would mean the end of everything they had ever known or loved. The mountain facility in Colorado had been designed to be invisible to conventional surveillance, its structures built deep into the granite peaks and shielded by technology that bent electromagnetic radiation around it like water flowing around a stone. But Mitchell's phase shifter technology allowed Torres and her hand-picked team to see through the deception, revealing the true scale of the installation that threatened both realities. 48 hours before the planned convergence event, Torres found herself in the cargo bay of a modified C-130 transport, watching her team make final preparations for what might be the most important mission in human history. She had selected 11 other personnel for the operation, all of them veterans, with security clearances high enough to access compartmentalized information and psychological profiles indicating absolute reliability under extreme stress. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison sat across from her, checking the alien-looking weapon Mitchell had provided him. The device resembled a conventional assault rifle only in its basic configuration. Its components seemed to flow and shift like liquid metal, and its energy readings showed power levels that should have required a small nuclear reactor. The other phase shifter weapons distributed to the team showed similar characteristics, each one apparently customized to its user's physical and psychological profiles in ways that conventional technology couldn't match. Admiral, I've been thinking about what Mitchell told us regarding the conspiracy within our own government, Morrison said quietly, his voice barely audible over the transport's engine noise. If high-ranking officials are involved, how do we know this mission won't be compromised before we even reach the target? Torres had been asking herself the same question since agreeing to lead the mission. Mitchell had provided detailed intelligence about the conspiracy, but the scope of the infiltration was so extensive that determining who could be trusted had become nearly impossible. We're operating under complete communications blackout, she replied. No one outside this aircraft knows our destination or mission parameters. Even our flight crew thinks they're transporting a training exercise to a different location. Captain Chen looked up from the phase shifter tactical display she had been studying. Ma'am, according to these readings, the installation has defensive systems that can track and engage conventional aircraft from over 300 miles away. How are we supposed to penetrate that kind of coverage? Mitchell, who had been silent during most of the flight, activated her personal device and projected a three-dimensional map of the facility and surrounding terrain. The defensive systems are designed to detect and engage threats from our timeline, she explained. But phase shifter technology operates by slightly shifting our molecular structure into a parallel dimensional state. To their senses, we'll appear as quantum fluctuations rather than solid objects. We'll be invisible until we choose to return to normal spacetime. The concept still strained Torres's understanding of physics, but she had seen demonstrations of the phase shifter's capabilities that defied every law of science she thought she understood. During their brief training period, she had watched team members walk through solid walls, become temporarily invisible, and manipulate matter at the molecular level. If Mitchell hadn't provided extensive documentation of the technology's principles and limitations, Torres would have dismissed it as elaborate trickery. Phase shifting has risks, Mitchell continued, her expression grave. Extended exposure to dimensional displacement can cause cellular degradation and neurological damage. We have approximately 6 hours before the effects become irreversible, which gives us a narrow window to reach the convergence device, destroy it, and extract safely. The cargo bay fell silent, except for the drone of engines, as each team member contemplated the implications of Mitchell's warning. They were volunteering to use technology that could kill them even if the mission succeeded, attacking a target defended by weapons they didn't understand, against enemies who included elements of their own government. The odds of survival were essentially zero, but the alternative was the subjugation of two entire realities. Torres activated her communications headset and contacted the flight crew. Pilot, we're approaching the drop zone. Begin descent to mission altitude and prepare for cargo deployment. The C-130's cargo ramp began to lower, revealing a spectacular view of the Rocky Mountains bathed in pre-dawn starlight. The target installation was invisible to the naked eye, hidden behind layers of technological deception, but Mitchell's phase shifter showed the facility's true structure as overlaid holographic data. The complex was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the intelligence photographs had suggested, with deep underground levels that extended miles into the mountain's core. Phase shifting in 30 seconds, Mitchell announced. Activating her device and watching as similar energy readings began emanating from the rest of the team's equipment. Remember, once we're shifted, conventional communications won't work. We'll be connected through quantum entanglement, which means your thoughts and intentions will be partially shared with the rest of the team. Try to maintain mental discipline and focus on the mission objectives. Torres felt a strange sensation as the phase shifter activated, like being immersed in warm water that penetrated every cell of her body. The world around her took on an ethereal quality, with solid objects becoming semi-transparent and new spectrums of light becoming visible. Most disturbing was the immediate awareness of her team members' thoughts and emotions, creating a mental background noise that required conscious effort to filter out. The jump from the aircraft felt different in phase-shifted state, with air resistance reduced to almost nothing and gravity seeming to affect them less than normal physics would predict. Taurus watched the altimeter on her phase shifter as they fell toward the mountain, noting that their descent rate was slower and more controllable than a conventional parachute drop would allow. As they approached the installation, its true nature became visible through their enhanced perception. The facility wasn't just built into the mountain. It had been grown there, using technology that manipulated matter at the atomic level to create structures that were part building and part living organism. Energy conduits pulsed like arteries throughout the complex, carrying power levels that would have overwhelmed any conventional electrical system.
Jesus Christ, Morrison whispered through their quantum communication link. That thing is alive. Mitchell's mental voice carried a grim confirmation.
The parallel timelines technology is based on biomechanical principles. Their installations are grown rather than built, which makes them incredibly difficult to destroy using conventional weapons. The convergence device is located in the central chamber, approximately 2 miles underground. We'll need to fight our way through automated defenses that adapt to our tactics in real time. The team landed silently on the facility's outer perimeter, their phase-shifted forms invisible to the sensor arrays that Torres could see scanning the area around them. Up close, the biomechanical nature of the installation was even more apparent. Walls breathed with slow, regular rhythms, and corridors seemed to adjust their configuration as internal traffic demands changed. Phase-shifter weapons are effective against biomechanical targets, Mitchell explained as they approached the main entrance. But remember, these defenses are controlled by artificial intelligence that learns from each encounter. Every tactic we use will be analyzed and countered, so we need to reach the convergence device before the system fully adapts to our capabilities. The entrance to the facility was a perfect circle, surrounded by symbols that seemed to move and change when viewed directly. Mitchell approached the barrier and placed her hand against its surface, causing the symbols to pulse with increasing intensity until the entrance dissolved like mist, revealing a corridor that stretched into the mountain's depths. Torres led her team into the facility, noting that the air inside had an odd quality that made breathing feel different, as if the atmosphere had been modified to support non-human physiology. The corridors were illuminated by a soft bioluminescent glow that emanated from the walls themselves, creating an environment that felt more like the interior of a living organism than a traditional building. Their progress through the facility's outer levels was swift and unopposed, but Torres could sense that they were being observed and analyzed by intelligences that operated on principles she didn't understand. The quantum communication link between team members carried an undercurrent of anxiety as each person became aware of the alien nature of their surroundings. Defensive systems are activating, Chen reported as her phase shifter detected energy buildups throughout the facility. Whatever was watching us has decided we're a threat. The first attack came without warning, as sections of the corridor walls suddenly liquefied and reached toward them like grasping tentacles. The phase shifter weapons proved effective, disrupting the biomechanical tissue with energy discharges that caused the attacking structures to retreat. But Torres could see similar defensive systems activating throughout the facility as the installation's intelligence adapted to their presence. We need to move faster, Mitchell urged, leading them toward a vertical shaft that descended into the facility's core. The deeper we go, the more sophisticated the defenses become. At the lowest levels, we'll be facing security systems that can emulate local space-time to prevent our escape. The descent through the facility became increasingly difficult as they encountered defensive systems that seemed to anticipate their movements and tactics. Corridors rearranged themselves to create dead ends, gravity fields shifted to disorient their movement, and automated weapons emerged from walls that had appeared solid moments before. The phase-shifter technology allowed them to survive encounters that would have destroyed a conventional assault team. But Torres could feel the strain building in her people as the extended dimensional displacement began to take its toll. After 90 minutes of fighting through the facility's defenses, they reached the central chamber housing the convergence device. The chamber was vast, easily the size of an aircraft hangar, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. At its center stood a structure that challenged every assumption Torres had about physics and engineering. The convergence device resembled a massive crystalline tree, its branches reaching toward the chamber ceiling while its roots extended deep into the mountain's core. Energy flowed through its structure like luminous sap, pulsing with rhythms that seemed to echo the heartbeat of something immeasurably large. Around its base, technicians from multiple timelines worked at control stations that appeared to be grown from the same biomechanical material as the facility itself. The device is already charging for activation, Mitchell reported, her phase shifter showing energy readings that were climbing toward critical levels. We have less than 30 minutes before the gateway opens. Once that happens, stopping the convergence event becomes impossible. Torres surveyed the chamber, noting the defensive systems that were already tracking their position despite their phase-shifted status.
The technicians at the control station showed no sign of being aware of their presence, but she could see weapon emplacements emerging from the chamber walls as the facility's intelligence prepared to defend its most critical asset. Can the phase-shifter weapons destroy something that large? Morrison asked, studying the massive device that dominated the chamber.
Mitchell's expression was grim as she consulted her readings. Not directly. But the device depends on quantum resonance between parallel timelines to maintain stability. If we can disrupt that resonance at the right frequency, the entire structure will collapse and take the facility with it. Torres made the decision that would determine the fate of two realities. All teams, execute destruction sequence. Target the resonance chambers at the base of the device. Remember, we have one chance to get this right. The attack on the convergence device began with simultaneous strikes against the quantum resonance chambers that maintained the device's stability. Phase shifter weapons discharged energy at frequencies designed to disrupt the delicate balance between parallel timelines, causing sections of the crystalline structure to crack and lose their luminescent glow. The facility's defenses responded immediately, unleashing automated weapons that filled the chamber with energy discharges designed to disrupt phase shifter technology. Torres watched two of her team members flicker between phase states as their equipment was damaged, forcing them to rely on conventional weapons against enemies that existed partially outside normal space-time. Resonance cascade is beginning, Mitchell reported as the convergence device began to vibrate with increasing intensity. The quantum field is destabilizing, but we need to maintain pressure on the remaining resonance chambers or the device will auto-repair. The battle in the chamber became a desperate race against time, as Torres's team fought to complete the destruction of the device while under constant attack from defensive systems that adapted to their tactics with each passing minute. The phase shifter technology that had allowed them to penetrate the facility was failing under the strain of extended combat, forcing them to rely increasingly on conventional weapons and tactics. With less than 10 minutes remaining before the scheduled activation, the final resonance chamber was destroyed in a coordinated attack that used the last of their phase shifter weapon charges. The convergence device began to collapse with a sound like reality itself screaming, its crystalline structure cracking and shattering as quantum energy discharged throughout the chamber. Phase shifters are failing, Chen reported, as her equipment sparked and went dark. We need to get out of here before we're trapped in dimensional flux. The escape from the collapsing facility was a nightmare of crumbling corridors and disintegrating biomechanical systems. Without their phase shifter technology, Torres and her team had to fight their way through conventional security forces that had been alerted to their presence. The installation's intelligence was shutting down systems throughout the complex as it attempted to prevent total cascade failure, but the damage to the convergence device was spreading like a quantum virus through the facility's interconnected systems. They reached the surface as the mountain itself began to collapse, the facility's biomechanical roots releasing their hold on the surrounding rock as power systems failed throughout the complex. The extraction helicopter that Mitchell had arranged was waiting at the predetermined coordinates, its crew unaware of the battle that had just saved two realities from conquest by forces that viewed human civilization as expendable. As they flew away from the collapsing installation, Torres watched the mountain cave in on itself, taking with it the technology and intelligence that had threatened both timelines. The conspiracy within their own government would take years to fully unravel, but without the convergence device and the support of parallel timeline technology, the conspirators were reduced to conventional criminals rather than agents of interdimensional conquest. It's over, Mitchell said quietly as they watched the last traces of the facility disappear beneath tons of collapsed stone. The gateway is destroyed, and the invasion fleet from the parallel timeline will be stranded without a way to cross over. Both realities are safe. Torres nodded, but she knew that the victory had come at a tremendous cost. Half of her team had been lost in the facility collapse, and the survivors would carry physical and psychological scars from exposure to technology that human beings weren't meant to use. The official records would list them as casualties of a training accident, their sacrifice known only to the few people cleared to know the truth about the war that had never officially been fought. But as Torres looked out at the peaceful morning sky, she knew that the impossible had been defeated by people who refused to accept that resistance was futile. The voice on the radio that had started it all had brought salvation from another reality. And sometimes the most important victories were the ones that no one would ever know about. The future belonged to humanity once again, in both timelines that continued to exist, because 12 people had been willing to fight for something larger than themselves.